How's my face look, Ben? Does it look good?
Gorgeous.
Does my face look good?
As good as it's ever looked.
Hey, welcome on in, everybody. It's the KSL Sports front page right here. I'm Alex Kirry. There's Ben Anderson right up there. So you can see Ben. You can see our screen, what we're looking at here, and our KSL Sports front page brought to you by University Federal Credit Union, as always. And what we do is we just jam about the stuff that's going on the front page of KSLSports.com and anything that's on the front page of just kind of sports in general. So I'm here at the KSL Broadcast Studios. Ben is, are you in front of a fridge there, Ben?
Yeah, it's in my kitchen.
Okay, so there you go. The American kitchen. Oh, he's giving you the full view. Look at that. Look at that. Good for you. I want to start off right in your wheelhouse then. Let's scroll down just a little bit because I know that the story that everybody was wondering about today was Russell Westbrook testing positive for coronavirus. Not today, but he's revealing, Ben, give us the details on he wasn't with the team. He wasn't in the bubble. He's not one of the 2 of the 322 that have tested positive in the bubble, right?
No, he's not. And here's what's kind of the weird thing, I guess, about this story. It's not surprising that players tested positive. It's how Houston Rockets coach Mike D'Antoni kind of talked about Russell Westbrook and said they expected him to join the team this week, and it doesn't sound like
in a couple of days. Yeah.
So it doesn't sound like that's close. So either the Rockets didn't know, or he was planning on joining them this week at some point and went out, and then they said, okay, before you travel, you have to take your test. And then he took his test and it was positive. So for whatever reason, he didn't join the team initially. It doesn't sound like that was coronavirus related. And now as he was preparing to go, or as he was getting tested, he did get that positive test. So now he's stuck out of that Orlando bubble for, depending on when he tested positive, it could be 10 days, could be 14 days. Who knows?
Right. And maybe that's why that's what I was thinking. I thought maybe he got with him and was like, when did you test positive or whatever? And they just kind of figured out maybe that in the next 4 days he would be able to still join because it was in that window. I don't know what the circumstance is, but he threw in the mask up at the end of his post here. And I think people after they get it and then they say mask up, it's it's kind of interesting, kind of how we switch how we feel about the whole thing. But in terms of a time, now this is a question that's in poor taste, but that's kind of my vibe anyway, Ben. So when is the best time to get coronavirus before the NBA? This is kind of it, right? The best time was, it's like an old proverb, right? It's like the best time to get coronavirus was 4 months ago. The next best time is right now. You don't want to get it right now, but this is a kind of a good time for Russell Westbrook, right?
Yeah, I think, Rudy and Donovan getting it when they got it was probably ideal. If you have to have it, they got it. They got rid of it. They don't have to worry about it as much as some of these other players. In fact, they now have the longest kind of recovery time and recuperation period to kind of realize, hey, how do I feel? What am I comfortable doing? How are my lungs doing? It sounds like they're both doing fine. Russell Westbrook now has to come back and figure out, are there any lingering symptoms? And he sounds like he's asymptomatic. He says he's feeling well, but you don't know exactly how they're going to kind of come on as this virus goes on for these players while it's active. So yeah, it's a tough time. It's going to be tough for the Rockets. You remember they made that major shakeup. They traded Clint Capella to the Atlanta Hawks. They went super small. They won 10 of 12 games over the last day of January through the last day of February, and everyone thought they'd figured it out. And then they lost 4 of 5 going into this break. And you thought, okay, this team really needs time to gel. So they don't have Russell Westbrook. Bruno Caboclo left the quarantine. I've got an article at KSLSports.com about that today. So he's got to go into quarantine for another 10 days. So he's not going to be with them while they're scrimmaging. 10 days from now, Alex, is when teams actually start doing inter-squad scrimmages. So they'll play against other teams 3 games before restarting the season. And James Harden's not there either. So this team actually doesn't have a lot of its players that they're going to be relying on. And chemistry is going to be huge right now.
Chemistry is going to be weird too, because I was talking about this with Scott Mitchell today, and it's something we're going to talk about on Unrivaled tonight. But I don't know if there's, when LeBron gets it, because in terms of superstar names, obviously Russell Westbrook's one of these guys. James Harden would be one of these guys where you have these superstars that get that are affected by it or they get COVID-19. If LeBron gets it and it's 4 games into the 8-game stretch that you start the season out with, that could be a massive disaster for the Lakers. And And then at what point do you go, well, we're just going to live with it, where the NBA and all these guys are just going to have to play each other, whatever your team looks like?
Yeah, and Alex, along those lines, which team do we think could survive a playoff series without their best player? And what's actually funny is the worse the team is, the more likely it is that they could still win a playoff series without those guys. So the Bucks aren't going to win a playoff series without Giannis. Lakers aren't going to win a playoff series without LeBron.
Right.
Maybe the Clippers without Kawhi, but I mean, Paul George hasn't been a proven playoff player for a long time. Really, since he was at the Pacers, he's kind of had some bad playoff series. So these teams that do lose a guy, if they lose a guy, and again, there was 2 positive tests today with inside the NBA bubble. I've got another article about that at KSLSports.com. If you lose one of those guys, you might have an early exit in the playoffs. So it's very serious. It's something players are going to have to keep an eye on. These teams are going to have to pay attention to. But it sounds like the NBA feels confident and comfortable going forward.
Here's the article right here about those 2 players testing positive. They don't say who it is, right? I mean, but then what? After they do they kick them out of the bubble? Do they stay in their hotel room inside the bubble? How do they isolate these guys? Do they just send them home? Can they just stay at a nearby hotel in Orlando that's not inside the bubble? How does it work?
Yeah, they put you right on whatever is I-9 or right there outside of Orlando. just one of the lesser non-Disney affiliated hotels.
Do they send you to Gatorland to
you go to Universal Studios. No, so you can go home. You can go back home if you can arrange a flight and get back home, or they have specific, like we're talking about, isolation options for these guys to go and stay. And, I would imagine most of these guys want to go home, especially if you're an East Coast guy or you're from one of the teams that's close to Orlando. You go back there, you don't have a 5 or 6 hour flight. But I mean, you've got 10 days that you can't come back until you have a negative test again. So you don't want to be sitting in a hotel away from all your amenities if you can go back home. So I'm sure that's what most of those players are doing.
Let's stay in the NBA vein for a minute, because the 2 quotes from a couple of Jazz players that I've loved about their dealing with the being inside the bubble is Donovan Mitchell saying, honestly, to me, it's like AAU, except for the quarantine part. But it's been like AAU. I've just been relaxing, studying film. He says he could get in trouble with all the snacks that are available. There's that. And there's Joe Ingles, who just does not sugarcoat anything and said the first 48 hours sucked. I don't know if you've ever been locked in a room with no window before. I can't open my window. I don't think anyone can. When you're in a room for a couple of months, it's going to get a bit stanky at times. Thoughts on those first few? I guess you got through the first 48 hours. Maybe they've gotten used to it after a week.
Yeah, I would hope now that they've been there for, I guess it's, closing in on a week already for the Jazz. It is a week now as of tomorrow. You hope they're ready, even though we haven't seen that many pictures of the Jazz players outside doing things. You're seeing a lot of photos of guys out fishing. I know a lot of the Mavericks players have gone out. The Clippers players have gone out.
Ben Simmons, that's an animal cruelty situation that he pulled off, by the way.
And not honestly, the joke about Ben Simmons not being able to hit water from a boat. He tried to throw a fish and he couldn't do it. It was just too fitting.
Why was the fish as like bouncy as an actual basketball? It hit off of a bunch of rocks, and he just dealt with it. He didn't even care. You can't do that kind of stuff, man.
I also don't know if the Jazz have had a day off, and they're practicing again today, and they've been practicing late. So we haven't seen a ton of photos yet of those guys kind of out doing their normal thing away from basketball. I would imagine Quinn Snyder's could give these guys a day off in the next day or two. So it's been, it sounds like they're all adjusting. I know Mo Bamba had some funny things to say to Donovan Mitchell yesterday after a girl said she got invited to the bubble, and Mo Bamba tried to blame Donovan Mitchell, and of course it wasn't Donovan. The girl came out and said it wasn't him.
Wow.
There are going to be opportunities for funny things, funny jokes to be made, and then for trouble to be
Look, we love to make the jokes, and even if it's just implied. I want to click over to something college football related. This whole weekend was just 100% was me freaking out about whether or not we were going to be able to watch any college football this season, hoping that the NBA season kind of goes off and nothing ends up getting canceled, but. I saw this a million times over the weekend in different iterations, and Mitch Harper has a write-up on KSLSports.com right now. Colin Cowherd says that BYU needs to join a conference. And I thought, that's great. Thank you so much for weighing in that BYU needs to join a conference. Not only do they know that, they're begging for that. And so is this the type of thing, is this the kind of environment that would create one conferences to be a little bit more like, hey, let's pull in a team like a BYU? or can it create the need for super conferences, which has always been also been talked about, and the possibility of making bigger conferences and then BYU becoming part of a conference that route, I guess.
Here's where the hard part is for BYU. And again, the Colin Cowherd thing. It's like when your parents tell you to like get a job when you're 16. It's like, well, you know, not everybody's hiring 16-year-olds right now. It's
right, but they'll say you should get a job. I had a job when I was 16, so obviously you need to have one too.
So for BYU, it's not like the Big 12 now comes calling because nobody has any money. Like all this money, all these teams were counting on. And Alex, I've been surprised. Maybe I was stupid to think this. But I've been surprised at this house of cards that college football is, that all college sports are. Like, are they living paycheck to paycheck like everybody else? That should not be the case, but it certainly feels like that's what's been going on. Is there's been all these issues with conferences, teams just not having money and feeling like as soon as those first paychecks stopped showing up, they found themselves in real trouble. So in that case, they're not going to find an additional $30 to $50 million a year in a TV deal to hand over to BYU. So that's going to be really hard to do. And then the problem is when money gets tight, I think a lot of companies, businesses, everybody does the wrong thing. Instead of saying, hey, let's try something new. Let's be exciting. Let's see if we can bring in new revenue. They get super conservative. They try and, batten down the hatches a little bit. And they say, let's not do anything out of the ordinary. Let's not try anything different. So no, we're not going to invite BYU. Now, smart financial institutions will bring in BYU understanding that they're a cash cow and they bring so many eyes. That's, the Mountain West Conference with the American Conference. Either of those would love to have BYU. BYU's put off playing those teams or at least joining those conferences to date. I don't think they're right now going to attach themselves to that just because they're panicking.
Some of the things that were brought up in all this, and they're all no-brainers to me anyway, but one thing that he mentioned, and I don't even know what this would look like anyway. What does the bowl season look like this year? Is there going to be a bowl season? Is there going to be a college football playoff? Are we going to crown a national champion with, by the way, a group that is not officially the NCAA anyway? How are they going to crown a champion as they've done in the past? I'm not sure, but Colin Cowherd brings this idea of only 12 bowl games. The college football playoff currently is at the four teams, but it needs to be more than that. But those are all things that, in my mind, you can't make any of those. You can't change any terms right now because we have no clue what's really going to go on. I came in today and I said, look, I don't see the college football season going off normally at all. Even saying just a conference only deal, I can't see it going to just even conference only. And these guys intellectually telling us this is why we're doing it for these health reasons, and then still trying to push a season just 3 or 4 weeks after when they would normally start. Yeah,
I don't think we're going to have a traditional bowl season, but we're not going to have a traditional bowl season because we're not going to have a traditional college football season.
Which I'll be thankful for. I mean, honestly, the bowl season is garbage, but go ahead.
If you play 9 games, if any team plays 9 games, that's an enormous success this season. Any conference can do it, especially if all 12 teams or 10 teams or 14 teams from any conference can figure out a way to play 9 games, or at least something that looks like a real schedule. I think that's going to be miraculous. I really have my doubts about college football this season. The bowl games, I think, are such a stretch. I think what you're going to end up doing is having conference championship games. Maybe you can get that college football playoff where 4 of the teams play, or you can go to the 6-team playoff that's been talked about for so long, which have 4 of the automatic qualifiers, have the worst P5 team or the lowest ranked P5 team. They, who's a conference champion, they play against the best group of 5 champion, and then the top 2 seeds get a bye. Maybe we could use this opportunity to say, let's try something new. But college football is not all that good about being creative, being inventive, or certainly being flexible, and that's been a problem.
Ben Anderson, your vote for the Washington Redskins that are now no longer going to be the Redskins, but will be the Washington somethings, and the logo is going to change. They will no longer be the Redskins. They'll no longer have the logo. So what's your vote then? Because they've announced that they're not going to, they don't know yet what they're going to call it. They don't know what they're going to unveil yet. What's your vote for the new Washington franchise?
I like the Red Tails. I like that opportunity. I don't think there's a major issue if you want to continue to kind of celebrate Native Americans and indigenous people here. And if you can find a way to do that and not do it in an offensive manner, I think that certainly has history, and it can show that you can kind of right the wrong that's there. Or you know what? Here's what I've always felt is so funny about Washington teams. You've got maybe the best history of any I guess it's a district. It's not really a state, but of any area in our country, if you can't find good history to tie into a name there, you're simply not trying, which is why Redskins was such a bad name in the first place. It's not all that applicable to the area, and it's offensive. And then there's so much great history that you could talk about. So, I mean, honestly, this should be a home run. Washington should be able to do it, other than the fact that they have the worst ownership in professional sports. It sounds like they're going to blow it for that reason.
Just the owner, right? Just Dan Snyder's lack of reading the room, so to speak, over the last 15 years has been pretty bad. All right, Ben Anderson, that's KSL Sports Front Page. We haven't done this together yet. We've hosted a number of radio shows together, but here we are doing this. Brought to you by University Federal Credit Union. Ben, anything else you want to add from the front page? Go check out Ben's bylines, by the way. The very top story right now is his story, the 2 players testing positive in the Disney bubble. 2 out of 322. That's a pretty good number so far. But
they'll keep that. If they can keep that number consistently, they're going to feel very good.
Ben, thanks for hanging out, and thanks for letting me join you on a Monday morning.
Thanks,
what is this? Yeah. Oh, it's a Monday. It's 4/18. I'm sorry, Monday. It's morning for me. It's morning for me.
That room doesn't have any windows. I know where you are.
It's like I'm in the bubble here. I'm like Joe Ingles. I can't open any of these windows in here. So, all right, we'll talk to you later, my friend, and have fun. Stay safe today.
Thanks, dude.
Okay, then I press end broadcast, right?